Welcome to Tekedia Daily. I'm Ndubuisi Ekekwe. A conversation we focus on Jaiz Bank and why it is currently performing poorly in the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Jaiz Bank is perhaps the pioneer interest-free banking institution in Nigeria, and it was the first that was licensed and certainly the first that is trying to navigate to understand the different constructs to run an institution that does not depend on interest within the banking sector. Currently, in May, that just ended, it is recognized as the worst performing stock in the Nigerian Stock Exchange for the largely big players. It dropped more than nearly 17%, about 17%, and we're closing at 95 Kobo. One of the biggest problems I can see from this banking institution is this fact that it depends on profit sharing over the collection of interest. Of course, there is nothing wrong with that, but the problem is when you are in a recession, very few companies are actually making profit. And when very few companies are making profit, it certainly means that there may not even be profits to share. So, and just like that, you can't find that income you need as a bank, even though the bills are still running. Compare that to the interest-making bank. Irrespective of the scenario, at least in most cases, if you don't pay them, they have other means to actually go after you. And so the implication for Jaiz Bank is that the guarantee of income is not always there if the companies are not making profit. And also there is also the issue of implementation. There may not be anything wrong with this model, but how do you really implement it? How are you going to get this very, very honest businessmen who can essentially give you all the necessary documents, resource for you to model what the profit is? So this the idea of tracking profit is very, very critical, because if you are going to give loans to startups and SMEs, we know they say the statistics that in Nigeria more than 70% of them collapse within 3 years. So does it mean that you just give out these loans and you're expecting profit, which most times you're not going to expect them, because these institutions, most of them collapse? Of course, you can go to traders, and I believe this may really be the best possible customer segment for non-interest banking. But you have to spend significant amount of your resource to track how these traders are calculating their profitability. So imagine a scenario where you have a trader who has a house help and who also has an office help. How are you going to quantify what he's paying these young people, despite the fact most times they don't pay them? So it makes it extremely challenging, because you just have to open the books and you just have to open anything possible to understand what is going on. Perhaps one of the most profitable sectors in Nigeria is actually public sector contracting. And this is certainly that sector that if you can get them and give them a loan, the profit sharing may actually be huge. But unfortunately, most cases, these big public sector contractors actually get mobilization fee from the government. So if the government gives them this mobilization fee, they don't necessarily have any need to go and get a loan. So it then falls back to manufacturers, or I will call farmers, if there are really big farmers in the country that can get the opportunity to get even a bank loan. So they need loans, and these are the institutions or the entities that actually need loans. But under recession, especially for manufacturers, how do you expect them to actually make profit? So it makes it difficult for a banking institution, you have people you are hired, you've employed, you have people you deploy every day to track what these customers are doing, and yet you are waiting for them to turn profit. In a time of recession, it is going to be extremely challenging. And also, Nigeria has this accounting system and a reporting system that may not have necessarily evolved to the point where Jaiz Bank can really benefit from. Unlike some countries where they have this tradition of this banking model, they have developed the infrastructure that will help them easily track when all these customers are actually making profit. So it is a very different market, and it's a very challenging one. But what Jaiz Bank is doing is normal. Of course, it is providing capital for businesses, and that is certainly what the country needs. But unfortunately, as a pioneer banking institution in this sector, it is going to go through a lot of challenges. And if you just look into the Q1 2007, they made a profit of 203 million naira. I mean, you don't see this kind of balance sheet for a bank, but of course, it's a bank that just started and is still growing, and is spending a lot of money trying to broaden from a regional bank into a national bank. But if you just give it some time, we hope to see how it transmits itself. But if you look at the fundamentals, if you look at the construct, you see that the income here is around about 1.5 billion, which is just a very highly insignificant amount of money. And then you now look at that key element in banking, the cost to income ratio is shooting more than 70%. And the reason why it's shooting this more than 70% is that it's costing it more in order to actually get its income. Because if the infrastructure does not exist, it means that Jaiz has to build it up. It means that it has to have a better means of tracking these customers so that when the time for the profit sharing is there, it can actually get what belongs to it. And GTB Bank ranks around 40%, the most efficient banking institution in Nigeria. Access Bank, and most of them run about 50, though there are also some exceptions, some run into about 60. But when you run into 70, as we are seeing for Jaiz, you certainly know that you're in a different league. So as the CEO Hassan noted in one of the interviews he granted Premium Times, that the provision of infrastructure for non-interest banking basically is still at the level of infancy. And I do believe vividly that this is actually where the government has to come in, because government issued this license, and government also has to provide a level environment for Jaiz Bank to succeed. Because if Jaiz does not succeed, it's actually depriving capital for some customers, for some Nigerian businesses and some Nigerian citizens that may need support from this bank in order for them to practice their enterprise, or for them to do whatever they want to do. So government must of necessity see that it provides structures, it provides systems and processes that will make this banking institution to also have a very good environment in order for it to perform its duty. I do believe vividly that in our nation, we just have to look for where we can get capital, irrespective of the nature of this product. And I do think that the Jaiz Bank is actually a very great product. It's a very great product, especially in a time when interest rate is more than 20%. Someone can come here and just focus on working as a bank in the total partnership and relationship, hoping that if that moment of profitability comes, you can actually go back and share. But of course, it's going to be very difficult for the bank, but I think it's actually a very good product for the customers. So you are listening to Tekedia Daily. Thank you.